I'm going to tell you about my experience with the Challenging Male Supremacy project. We ran a study into action process, which I'm going to describe. I'm not claiming this is a transformative process, but I think it was opening a space for men to look at issues around male supremacy in their lives and begin to think about ways to change. So assembling. We met over 9 sessions. Some were evening sessions, some were day-long sessions. We were a group, or in the first time we did it, we were a group of cisgender men, about 14 or 15 of us. The second time we did it, we had 2 trans men in the group. We came together around a shared commitment to challenging male supremacy in our intimate relationships and the work that we did out in the world. And most of the guys in the room were doing different kinds of political work in New York City, whether it's economic justice work, racial justice work, or gender justice work, or work around sexual rights. Assembling also in the sense of constructing, putting something together. So I felt like we were creating a home for ourselves, and a lot of the people who came into that space felt that they hadn't had a space like that before to talk in the way that they talked. A lot of people came into the group to talk about the challenges that they were facing in their intimate relationships and the stuff that they'd learned as a man around desire, their experiences around desire, their expectations around desire in terms of their intimate relationships were not in keeping with their political commitments in the world. So out in the world they were saying one thing about, you know, I'm a good man, I'm challenging male supremacy. In their own relationships, things looked a little more complicated and different. So we talked quite a lot about that disjunction between what's happening in our own lives and what we're saying in public. But also desire, because we talked about what do we want to create. So we organized the discussions in terms of a set of commitments that we wanted to live by. So we talked about desire as a kind of motive force. And I sometimes think that in the left we need to say more, you know, certainly in the NGO kind of left, we need to say more about our desire for the change we want to see, the world we want, and not like a mission statement, you know. So I'm cheating here a bit, that's really one word. Because we tried to bring it all together, so psyche, you know, it was kind of, in some ways we were looking back to second wave feminism, consciousness raising, so we read stuff, we talked about it, we reflected on it. But we also tried to think about, well, not just think about, practice the ways in which our experiences as men had been embodied, or we embody. So it's in our bodies, it's not just in our heads. And we can't change ourselves and change the world if we can't think our way out of it. We have to practice differently. So we always started every session with a body-based practice, a centering practice, a breathing practice, to get ourselves more into our bodies. And we drew on a body of practice called somatics, which is a body-based healing practice that some folks are trying to relate to social change. Structure, we talked about intersections between different issues, racism. You know, we can't think about male supremacy without thinking about white supremacy, certainly in the US context, and also how to relate that to economic issues. We talked a lot about our own accountability for our privilege, whether it's male privilege, white privilege, class privilege. How are we holding ourselves accountable for that? How are we holding each other accountable for that? And we practiced ways of holding each other accountable for that. But we also talked about different forms of accountability in relation to the state. So holding the state accountable, but a lot of the issues that we're dealing with now, I would say, are around finding alternative ways to deal with sexual violence or gender violence that doesn't involve using the state. So we talked about community accountability processes, and members of the group now are involved in processes that are holding men accountable for their behavior that doesn't involving the cops. So that's a big strain of work that we're involved in. And then finally, I think one of the things that we maybe didn't do such a good job of that we want to do more on is how do we hold friction positively? How do we hold friction within the group or within movement spaces as a constructive force? Because I think sometimes we try and talk about we need to all agree on things, and we sometimes kind of paper over the consequences of being a very diverse group will be friction. And then how do we have skills and practices that help us deal with that friction. Because I think in the US, it's a very polarized society in lots of ways, but that friction is immobilizing. So how do we work with a friction that's mobilizing, that can move us forwards? Thank you.